This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there. Hello everyone, I'm Nitsa and it is Friday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. This time around we're looking at one of my favorite keyword abilities, Morph. You can play any card with Morph face down for 3 mana, and it is a 2/2 creature. Then, all permanents with Morph have one way or another to turn face up. Face down creatures put your opponent in a difficult spot sometimes, and they have to make some tough decisions. Additionally, lots of creatures with Morph give you a bonus effect when you turn them face up. Morph originally debuted back in Onslaught block and has returned twice since then, in Time Spiral block and Tarkir block. Also, this video includes cards with Mega Morph, which is one of the laziest mechanics ever, since it is just Morph that also puts a +1/+1 counter on the creature when it turns face up. Anyway, Morph recently received some extra support in Commander 2019 with the Kadena Slinking Sorcerer deck entirely focused on the mechanic, and that inspired me to do this list. There are almost 200 cards with either Morph or Mega Morph, and in this video we're going to look at the 10 that have done the most in competitive Magic. Before we get started, a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. Pro Tour and Mythic Championship Top 8s, as well as Legacy and Vintage Championship Top 8s are worth 2 points, and a Grand Prix Top 8 is worth 1 point. Now, let's move to number 10. At number 10 is Grim Haruspex. The Haruspex comes with a powerful ability, drawing you a card anytime one of your other creatures dies. The fact that you can play it face down and only turn it up for a single black mana can sometimes mean you really surprise your opponent by getting to draw a card off of the death of one of your creatures, something that isn't going to make them feel very good. The Haruspex picked up all 10 of its points in Rally the Ancestors decks, a deck that sought to sacrifice a bunch of creatures with Zolaport Cutthroat in play, then cast Rally the Ancestors and do it all over again. The Haruspex was nice because it helped you draw a bunch of cards, ideally helping you hit the rally you need to combo off. Rally was the best deck of its time, but it was only together for a very brief time before Rally the Ancestors rotated out of the format, so the Haruspex was limited to only 10 points. It seems unlikely that it sees play in any non-rotating formats. And number 9 is Hidden Dragon Slayer, which comes with the previously mentioned Mega Morph mechanic instead of just regular Morph. In addition, when it gets turned face up, it can destroy big creatures, and that's a nice thing to have around, especially since it is just a reasonable creature in addition to having that ability. It was played in various Selesnya aggro decks in Standard. Standard was dominated by lots of Dragons decks at the time, so the Dragon Slayer very flavorfully killed a lot of them by turning face up. And number 8 is Stratus Dancer, which can be played face up as a fairly aggressive flyer, but if you play it face down, it can counter instant and sorcery spells when it turns face up. It also comes with Mega Morph, meaning it also gets to be a little bit larger when it turns face up. The Dancer was extra useful in the Standard of its time since there were several key cards that were instants and sorceries, like Rally the Ancestors, which we mentioned earlier, as well as Collected Company and Dromoka's Command. It was played in aggro, mid-range, and control decks at various times while it was in Standard. And number 7 is Birchlore Rangers, which, while it has Morph, is almost never played face down. Even without Morph, the Rangers would be an excellent card since they can work together with lots of other elves to produce obscene amounts of mana in a hurry if you have a few ways to untap your creatures. Because its ability doesn't involve the actual tap symbol, you can actually tap elves for it the turn they come down, and that can lead to some serious snowballing since elves are so cheap. The Rangers were combined with Glimpse of Nature and Extended to make an obscenely busted elf tribal deck that could win incredibly quickly, since every elf you played now produced mana, and you drew a card every time you played an elf, and that meant you could rip through your entire library. The deck destroyed Pro Tour Berlin in 2008, taking 7 of the top 8 spots. The extended metagame adapted and dealt with the deck, but Glimpse of Nature would be banned when Modern was created a few years later for fear of something similar happening. Decks powered by the Ranger and the Glimpse have also put up a few points in Legacy, though not any since 2016. At number 6 we have Ash Cloud Phoenix, a morph creature who does some pretty unique stuff with the mechanic. As long as the Phoenix is face up, it can't die, it comes back face down, and when you do turn it face up, it damages each player. This, combined with aggressive flying stats, made it a pretty good card for aggro decks, especially against opponents who were playing lots of removal. It hasn't seen play anywhere since rotating out of Standard, though. At number 5, we have Vesuvan Shapeshifter, another morph creature that occupies some interesting design space. The Shapeshifter is an extra powerful clone, because it has the option to turn face down and clone other stuff whenever it wants by turning face up, which is a pretty powerful effect. It gets extra interesting in conjunction with other creatures with Morph, and in block and standard it was comboed together with Brine Elemental to lock the opponent out of the game, since every turn you could turn the shapeshifter back face down, turn it face up and copy the elemental, and get that morph trigger, and make it so your opponent basically never untapped. In standard, it was also played alongside Revelark, since it could be brought back by Revelark and copy a ton of sweet value creatures in the deck who do stuff when they enter the battlefield. It was also played in more typical aggro decks in both formats. And number 4 is Rattleclaw Mystic, a mana dork with Morph. The Mystic could be useful both face down and face up, though it was usually played face up because you wanted to get the ramping and fixing train going early. It was kind of sweet that you could turn it face up for 2 mana, get all 3 Teamer colors, meaning you netted 1 mana already, and on top of that, the Mystic could tap for a single mana that turn as well. Both options result in some extra mana and fixing early in the game. It was also played face down sometimes because it could get you back Death Mist Raptor, a card we're going to look at in just a moment. The Mystic was played in lots of different green decks since mana dorks are usually in pretty high demand in standard. This included things like Teamer, Aggro, Gruul monsters, and Devotion to Green. I don't think it's a good enough mana dork to see play outside of standard though. And number 3, I have Death Mist Raptor, a morph creature who really likes it if you have other ones. Anytime a morph creature is turned face up, the raptor gets to come back from the graveyard, and you can choose whether or not it comes back face up or face down. Generally, it is better to go with face up when the creature comes back, since it's a 3/3 with Death Touch, and that's a pain to deal with in combat. The raptor helped spawn an entire deck built around the morph mechanic, Green-White Megamorph, which was quite successful in standard. Having a creature like the raptor, who just refuses to stay dead, is a pretty good way to grind out a win. It was a pretty good inclusion even in decks that only had 1 or 2 morph creatures too, since it had reasonable stats to begin with. So, in addition to those Megamorph decks, it was also played in Dragon Control, Devotion to Green, Collected Company, and Abzan. At number 2, we have Exalted Angel. While she doesn't have a trigger that happens when she is turned face up, she does have a pretty low cost for turning face up, meaning you can be attacking with a 4/5 with lifelink as early as turn 3 with a little bit of extra mana. Also, it isn't actually lifelink, it's slightly better because any kind of damage it does gains you life, not just combat damage, and granted that doesn't come up super often or anything, but I do think it's worth noting. She has been played in ramp decks in a variety of formats since attacking with her on turn 3 is pretty impressive. In addition to being played in ramp decks and block, the Angel was also played in Astral Slide decks in both block and standard, which could exile the Angel while it was face down, only for her to come back as a 4/5 with lifelink. Her most frequent home in standard, though, was Mirari's Wake decks, which were capable of flipping her incredibly quickly thanks to extra mana. In extended, she was played primarily in Tron decks, another deck capable of producing mana very quickly. Exalted Angel these days is only legal in the Eternal formats, and it seems unlikely she will ever see play there. However, she occupies a pretty high spot on this list, and it seems unlikely that she's going to fall off of it anytime soon. And at number 1, by a lot, is Den Protector. Amusingly referred to as Maternal Witness, the Protector can bring cards back from your graveyard when she turns face up, and she comes with an evasive ability that can actually let her be the beatdown. It was very easy to get 2-for-1s with Den Protector, and that made her a heavily played card during her time in Standard. She appeared alongside her friend Death Mist Raptor, which was pretty nasty value. Turn her face up, get something back from your graveyard, and then your Raptor also returns to the battlefield. Yeah, that's the engine that powered a lot of decks in Standard, especially Green-White Megamorph. Unlike the Raptor, though, she was heavily played her entire time in Standard, and was essentially a staple for green decks while she was legal there. This has given her a really high score, despite only seeing play in Standard so far. Her early days, she was mostly played in Megamorph and Abzan decks, then Selesnya Tokens and Collected Company, and finally, Delirium. Well, that does it for this MTG Top 10. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch the rest of my MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe, and if you want to see the ones I've already done, you should see the playlist on your screen now. Thanks for watching.